Thank you for your interest in Kapow software. In this video, I'll be demonstrating automating content migration into IBM Connections. As you can see, we can extract content from many different sources directly from websites, file systems, from database systems, from other CMS systems, or from older versions of Connections. Transformation rules are applied to the content and metadata. It's mapped into the intermediate database, and from there, it's loaded into the new Connections environment. This is the Kapow Katalyst Design Studio. The main window is Kapow's proprietary extraction and integration browser. The steps across the top are the robot that define how we're going to interact with the content in the browser. The first step of this robot is going to load a page. When I pass by the step's executed, and you can see that we're loading a forum HTML page. And the next step is a loop step. That step's created by clicking on the page, like most of the other steps, and I can move up and down the tag hierarchy of the HTML until I have the area selected that I'm interested in. In this case, I want to select the first row of this table. Right click. I'm going to create a loop step, a for each table row loop step, excluding the first row since the first row is a title row. I click on this step. The loop step will iterate through the table one row at a time. And then from each of these rows, we can perform the following steps. The first step is extracting the value of the category name that's represented in that row. We'll be extracting the category name as text and storing it into the category attribute value. Over here to the bottom right of the Design Studio is where we manage our variables and data structures. I've created a data structure that can hold all of the attributes that are necessary to collect all of the forums and messages from each of the forums from this site. I pass by the extract category step, and that value is extracted into the category variable, and now we're extracting the description. The next step clicks into the forum, and that will load each of the threads of that category. The next step is created by clicking on the forum name. That loads each of the threads in that category. And again, I've created another loop step by clicking on the row, right click, selecting loop, defining the type of loop step, and again I can iterate through this table row by row and collect the information from each row. We're getting the name of the thread, and now we're clicking into the thread, and from there we're going to extract each of the messages. Each of the messages we're getting the author name and the message itself, and now we have our data structure fully populated, and we'll be storing that to our intermediate database. Now that I've designed the robot in design mode step by step, I can switch to debug mode to run the robot and test the robot. The robot will loop through the entire site until all of the messages from all of the forums are saved to the intermediate database. This robot will demonstrate loading content into Connections using the web front end. I go to my instance, enter my credentials. When I enter my credentials into the website, those actions are saved as steps up above. So is the clicking of the login button. Now that I've logged into my instance, I query my database of forums that I've already saved off from the Jive forum that I extracted from, and now I'm going to proceed through the website just as I would if I were to create a forum normally, clicking on the Start a Forum button, and then entering the name of the category and the description. These values I'm entering are coming from the database that I've queried. So I'm taking the forums populated into the intermediate database from Jive and mapping them into the new Connections forum that I'm creating. After I've entered the values for this new forum, I click Save. Now that the first forum's been created in Connections, I'm going back to my intermediate database and I'm going to populate new topics into my forum. Each of the topics will be the threads that I've extracted from the Jive forum. So I'm entering the title and the author and all of the other components of these messages from my intermediate database, the content that I've extracted from the Jive forum, mapping it into the forums in the Connections website, and essentially looping through the databases that I've created from the other site, programmatically using the forums on the Connections site to recreate all of the same forums and threads into IBM Connections. The other approach is using the API. I'll demonstrate that in the next robot. Using the Connections API, robots in Kapow can be developed quickly to do either full migrations from one instance of Connections to another or an ongoing synchronization. This first robot will demonstrate reading the blogs from an older version of Connections. This is a Connections 3.0 instance. I'll be extracting these blog entries from this instance, saving them to an intermediate database, and from there loading them into a Connections 4.0 instance. I'll run the robot that reads the blogs from the first instance. Here we can see all of the blogs being read. Now, in the case of a synchronization, these would be loaded to an intermediate database, an object key would be generated for each of the entries, and then on subsequent runs of the robot, the deltas and new content could be identified and then loaded into the new Connections environment. For migration, we'll be extracting all of the existing blogs, the intermediate database, and then loading those to the new instance. The 4.0 Connections instance target has no blogs in it currently. We'll run the load robot now. We can see that the blogs have been migrated to the target. In addition to a migration, the robots can be run on a schedule or continually in order to synchronize the two sites. Contact sales@kapowsoftware.com to see how we can automate your content migration.